The Rams and Chargers will face off in a preseason game this weekend. And the team that has more compelling storylines, the Chargers, which we'll break down in a moment. The Dodgers are going to get Dustin May back, and he looks like a combination between an assassin and Carrot Top. And I tell you something, there's a surprise choice as to a player who can impact the college football playoff chase at USC. Good morning, I'm James. This is your daily dose of sports and snark for the greatest sports city in the world, Los Angeles. This is Faithful Angelenos. It's August 12, 2022. I'm broadcasting from somewhere in a basement of my temporary job. So when I tried to broadcast from the hotel yesterday, it didn't download for hours. My bad. But I also want to thank the new subscriber who joined us yesterday. Appreciate every last one of you. If you like the content we put out, clickety-clack the like button. Clickety-clack the subscribe button. There's a notifications bell. Hit that. It'll let you know when we drop new content. Sharing is caring. Let people know we exist. And yes, comments. For Pete's sake, Omaha ain't cutting it. I need friends. Now, before we get to the notes, let's take a quick look at the scoreboard. There was only one game yesterday involving LA sports teams. And honestly, we'd be better off with zero. It was the Sparks. They lose to Connecticut whatevers, 93-69. And even though there's one game left in the year, and even though they're 13-22, they are technically still alive in the WNBA playoff race. Sparks, it's time to go. Just die, okay? I feel like the entirety of the LA sporting community is just standing over your deathbed in a retirement home, watching that last pulse of coagulated blood just crawl millimeter by millimeter up those translucent blue veins. We don't need to see this. Put yourselves out of your misery. Just don't even show up to that last game, please. By the way, today the Dodgers, they're in Kansas City. They'll play at 5 o'clock. Tony Gonsolin, 13-1. The Royals counter with Daniel Lynch, 4-7. Now, if you remember the NFL draft, the Chargers took Isaiah Spiller to be what we thought was Austin Eckler's backup. Not so fast. Former backup running back Joshua Kelly took the hint, and as a result, he's crushed it in the weight room. He's competing his ass off because he knows his career is in a little bit of jeopardy right now. Now, you might say, well, how did it happen? He lost favor with the coaching staff. He was a bit of fumble prone as a rookie. And so now that he's making this big impression, it's going to matter in the Rams game because the Chargers don't tackle during training camp. So we don't know how much he's improved in terms of keeping possession of the ball. This is going to be his first big shot to show he's improved on that. And also the fact that he's bulked up means he's better in pass protection, particularly on the right side. And we've talked about how right tackle is an issue for the team. So this is a big game for him. It's also a big game for a cornerback, you might recall, Michael Davis. The guy used to be a starter, and he just fell off the depth chart. And he started 14 games last year, but he only had one pick. So he's admitting that personal stuff distracted him last year. He hinted that it was basically about a previous girlfriend, and all I can say is, dude, we have all been there. Every one of us has an ex that is just, or when they weren't an ex, were just driving us batty. I'm sorry you had to learn your lesson the hard way by fighting to keep your job, but that's just the way it is. See, the Rams and the Chargers are had the same offseason approach. They went nuts on drafting defensive backs. So, Mr. Davis, good luck. Now, you might be asking, what about defensive lineman Jerry Tillery? Wasn't he supposed to be trying to fight hard for his job? Thus far, we're not exactly hearing a lot of good things. The coaching staff is apparently hinting that he's got to, quote, earn his way into the league, unquote. Now, they didn't say those exact words about Tillery, but there was a strong insinuation there. So he's probably playing on Saturday. Also for the Chargers, Derwin James sat out his 13th practice. And everybody's been saying the right things, but at what point does it become an issue? Also, for Saturday's game, Storm Norton and Trey Pipkins are both going to play. They have to. They are battling to see who's going to be the starting right tackle. That was the only hole in the Chargers' offensive line going into this year. Final note for the Bolts, Dea Berberian is apparently easing off the push to force her brother, Dean Spanos, into selling the team. Oh, she's still suing her family. Best sister ever, am I right? But no, she doesn't want them to necessarily sell the team. And apparently the difference is that the values of the NFL teams are rising so fast, basically it's too good of a time for the Spanos family to cash out, just to ride that bull market. She owns 15% of the team, by the way. According to The Athletic, Dustin May wants to come back to the Dodgers with more than just his health. He's adding a new pitch in his repertoire, a changeup. So, he's got a fastball that hits 100, a four-seamer, a cutter, a curveball, and now a changeup? Now, you might be saying, why do you need that many pitches? But the reality is, a changeup would probably do him a lot of good. Everyone in the batter's box is used to seeing Dustin May throw stuff that touches or surpasses 100 miles an hour. So, could you imagine the damage of a changeup? I mean, dude, just because your elbow got jacked up last year and you had to go with Tommy John surgery doesn't mean you got to take revenge by just snapping everybody's ankles on check swings. Wow. And by the way, if you want an idea of Dustin May's pitching, a coach described it as somebody throwing bowling balls at 100 miles an hour. Yeah, that's not intimidating to hear. Not at all. Of all the transfers that came to USC that could impact the college football bowl playoff system, sure, you could say Caleb Williams, but ESPN listed linebacker Eric Gentry as one of the 25 most important players who could impact the playoff race. Now, understand that the Trojans, they brought in a lot of linebackers. I mean, we've talked about Shane Lee. We've talked about, I think his name's Roquan. I forgot the gentleman's last name at the top. But Gentry, it's not because he has the pedigree of Shane Lee coming from Alabama or the other gentleman coming from Auburn. No, it's not pedigree and it's not flash. It's because he's steady. And the Trojans are going to need that too on their defense. They can't just have people who just make flashy plays, because once those guys get burned, well, you don't want that. So yeah, they really think Eric Gentry, the transfer from Arizona State, is going to be a difference maker. Speaking of bowl games, CBS Sports comes out with a weekly bowl projection, right? And their bowl projection now has USC playing Cincinnati in the Cotton Bowl. I've been to the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. It's a horrible stadium. Sorry, guys. Meanwhile, with UCLA, just to make the conversation, they're projecting them right now anyway to go back to the Holiday Bowl to play Virginia, which is interesting because does San Diego have the right to refuse UCLA? You remember? The Bruins were supposed to play in the Holiday Bowl last year, and they pulled out literally at the last minute. We talked about the Chargers earlier. Quick note on the Rams. The battle to be the interim third wide receiver is what I would look at if I were a Rams fan, because after all, Van Jefferson is out. He had surgery. They think he's going to be back in time for the year, but assuming he doesn't, who becomes the third option? You've got Tutu Atwell, who had a lousy rookie year but worked out diligently with Cooper Kupp. And, of course, you also have Ben Skowronek, the guy who is a run-blocking monster, but he did drop a few passes last year. And I suppose if you want to look for another battle, you could talk about defensive back as well. The Rams brought in a bunch of youngsters to play defensive back. Jacoby Durant, Darian Kendrick, Terrell Burgess. They're all in the running. You might want to take a peek at that. LAFC GM John Thorrington expressed confidence in Coach Steve Cherundolo's ability to find playing time for the 5 high-quality strikers that are currently with the Black and Gold. Now, look, I'm going to be honest. I admit at the start of the year I was skeptical about Cherundolo's ability because he used to coach the Las Vegas Lights of the USL, and that team was an absolute abomination, and I thought he had to take some of the responsibility for it. But apparently that guy just had a lousy roster. You know, the Lights were just garbage. Maybe Thorrington's right about Steve Cherundolo. I'm not a soccer expert, but I have to temper that and say it's still too early to figure out if Gareth Bale, if Carlos Vela, if Christian Arango, if all these guys are okay with this. Remember, every time Carlos Vela gets pulled from a game, he looks like he wants to fight somebody on the sidelines, right? So is he really willing to have his playing time cut, for example? The other question for LAFC comes up again with Gareth Bale. His deal, if the option gets picked up, gets bumped up to a designated player status, which would mean that LAFC would have 4 designated players. The other 2 are Carlos Vela and Brian Rodriguez. And you would have to ask yourself, are you okay with Brian Rodriguez possibly being the odd man out? Finally, for the LA Galaxy, manager Greg Vanney has expressed cautious optimism that FC Barcelona transfer Ricky Puig can play Saturday. They'll be playing the Vancouver Whitecaps on Saturday. It's apparently a visa issue. If that gets settled, he's on the pitch. Because the Galaxy needs something to basically light a fire under their asses. Now, if you enjoyed today's broadcast, don't forget to like and subscribe to Faithful Angelenos. We are trying to build something here for LA Sports. Thank you for watching. I'm James. We'll be back tomorrow. Faithful Angelenos is a Kian Corta El Queso production. Take care.